25, so there's so many placement points, if not all of them, still left onto the board. So you got to imagine what Thomas HD right now is thinking, going up front, ahead of everybody else in the zone. But take note, he's not landing on that ultimate low layer.
You can see how hard it's going to be if you are a solo in this lobby. So many players still left in this one. Seti has to do that task as well now. And he does still have quite a lot of mats, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem. As long as he plays his heals, he should be fine. Fury and Lusher though, popping off here. They've already picked up quite a few eliminations, and they're trying to sort out which bits of loot they need, and they're going to get some more eliminations along the way as well.
That was a great find at the perfect moment, as they're getting smushed into the zone, knowing they're going to have to sacrifice some heals if they want to stay here. With that refresh, that's allowing them to go above and beyond, but Lusha gets tagged out. The ODM gear, one of the huge disadvantages when you're trying to rotate through the late game, and you get tagged up, you get dropped down low. Now Fury, just like some of the other teams that we've seen into the game up until this point, is just stuck as a solo.
The zone's going to keep on pulling. All their mats are going to continue to be expended. And you can see Artul up on height, doesn't really have much people challenging him, but can't speak too soon. There will be players in this lobby that might start to look up now.
Yeah, it's not built as high as you normally would in this position, so anybody at a moment's notice can either try to contest it or simply try to build up and steal it away. Kempton's just going to try to use the kinetic blade. He looks, doesn't like what he sees, falls right back on down like everybody else. They're slowly but surely chipping away at that high ground, while Fury's doing the same thing. Zone's pushing him in, Thomas HD as well, but when you look up, it's the team you'd expect to see there from the very beginning. It's Queasy, it's Veno.
I told you a team would wait for their moment, and their moment came and they did not stop. Queasy and Veno are up above the rest of the lobby in a position we are so familiar with. Seti on low ground, a position we're similar to seeing him in, but unfortunately not as a solo, unfortunately not looking for an elim. He needs to try and get back into the zone. It's going to be so tough for him though. Fury, similar spot, backside of the zone, praying for an opportunity, and Say might just be an opportunity. Can he connect? He can. Fury with a big shot there, and a lifeline in this game.
Huge ODM opportunity to try to surprise some teams, but all the solos are getting lost throughout all the action. Into the top 5 we go. The zone is now beginning to start to close, and our 12th moving. Everybody's getting dropped out. Even the players that are left alive are in shambles. No heals, no builds. This one's going to go down to a wire. I don't even know if the zone's going to close this game.
The zones have been so taxing. They've moved so far. All these players running out of match. You can see Chicho, he doesn't really have anything left to work with, just has his shotgun, and he can't hit the shot. And so for Veno and Queasy, it's so easy. We've seen them in this position win games, and I bet you there's no doubt in their minds how this one's going to close out. They just have to connect the finishing shots, the finishing blows, and that will be it. Game 1 is won by Queasy and Veno, the team we cannot stop talking about. They just seem to win it all every single time.
Even when we don't see much of them throughout the course of the game, they say, hey, broadcast, it's our time to shine. They jump to the high ground and they steal the show.
Perfectly timed height take as well. We looked at Arthur at the top and we said it was vulnerable. There was an opportunity for someone to come through and take it, and who better than the best high ground team in Fortnite history? Queasy and Veno, man, unstoppable. The final shots here, both players putting in a shift, and not many eliminations for them. It's not like they went crazy, right? But they still get the job done, they still get it finished, and a nice way to start the day.
Yeah, I think they got a little thank you to Thomas and Malibuca, because remember, early on in the game, it was them who took out that first team, trying to create that tower in the sky. But Queasy and Veno, these guys are gotta be feeling on top of the world, starting the day off hot with a huge VR.
Hey, look, let's send it back to the analysts to break down the action from game 1. Zeke, what you got?
As Jacob said, Veno, Queasy feeling on top of the world, both physically and, of course, on the standings. Game number 1, every time we try to shift away from this duo, they just say, why are you looking over there? You need to be looking at us. This is how we start week 3. They are trying to make a statement saying, if you guys make it to Grands, you will have to face us there. My, oh my, what a way to start, Taco.
Now, this was definitely a reason why we call them a spotlight duo, because Queasy and Veno, they emphasize on their perfect opportunities. Comeback and Artur, they were doing their best to try and hold on to the high ground, but as soon as those wood builds come out, you can kind of just assume that they're running out of materials, they're running out of resources, and for Queasy and Veno, that's like sharks in the water.
Yeah, just classic Veno and Queasy gameplay. I think they're almost half asleep when they're playing. It's like, oh, look, we're on height again. We just close out the rest of the lobby, you know, all these materials, we have it all. But I really really like the way they actually went up and took high ground. They actually both double kinetic blade up at the exact same time. It almost gave Combat and Arthur just no chance. You know, who do you shoot at? Because it's very difficult to coordinate your shots when there's just two players suddenly above you, as we saw at just then. But of course, really well played from this duo. And I mean, I'm running out of things to talk about them because they're just winning on high every single time, and almost even buffed now because, of course, we don't have that heal-off meta.
It's just the discipline that this duo just seems to really synchronize amongst each other, because over and over again, how many times do we see Quizzo remaining on top, Veno dropping to either the mid or low ground layers to cause a little bit more disruption. And again, the congestion had already built up a little bit, or at least the last remaining solos that were there at the end, but it is just impressive how they managed to consistently find themselves controlling how they want the lobby to end.
Yeah, let's take a look at our standings to see how things are going. Now, of course, Trulex, Chico here right behind them. Got 8 eliminations, putting in so much work there. But as we kind of like start to look down the leaderboard, I feel like this is kind of pretty standard EU. I do like that Queasy Veno did start very, very strong, right? But there are definitely some names on here like Lucian Fury, right? We talked about them at the beginning of the show. They have to perform well if they want to continue their FNCS run. And starting in the 6th place, that's a pretty good place to begin.
Well, they need a top 5. We mentioned it at the top of the show. We're talking about how they needed a top 5 potentially. Obviously, there could be a few shifts, but top 5 is our prediction for how well these guys need to do. Solid performance in game number 1, though, because with all that pressure going into the, the final week, the final 6 games of your season potentially, it is going to be difficult for them, but, a solid start for them.
And especially considering that a lot of that end game was results of individual gameplay, I think it kind of just showcases the fact that with the most, or I mean, maybe it's speaking too soon, right? It's only game number 1,
Yeah.
the most recent zone transition,
Yeah.
but again, Circle didn't even get a chance to fully close by the time we saw the lobby finalize itself. So I think we are maybe expecting to see the aggressive highlights here, and for Lush and Fury, that could work out well.
I mean, what I noticed as well, a lot of the teams actually ran out of materials there. We saw a complete contrast to what we saw in week 1 and 2, where all of our teams still had so many materials going to the end game. Almost every single player, we switched them. It's like, no mats, switch another player, no mats, switch another player, no mats. Having to jump into boxes trying to get those refreshes, it's really made a big difference. These extra distances these zones pull have made it a little bit more difficult to keep those materials going throughout the rest of the game, but it's been interesting to see so far, and I'm excited for the rest of the game.
Yeah, this is the 2nd page of the standings. Take a look. Seti Kami's 12th place currently, right behind Malabuka and Thomas. Once again, and look, even Janice and Reason up in that 16th place. Remember, this is that last chance. If you and your duo cannot make it here, you can't make it to Surge Week. But hopefully some of these duos are just saying, let's just go straight to Grands. Let's just perform well right here. We know we can do it.
Yeah, I mean, can do it, but I'm going to call Levin a little bit of the caster's curse here from Malabuka and Thomas, because we see them with those overclock pulse rifles. They get control of Rift Island, but ultimately it didn't result in that top 5 placement position that you would have probably expected when you see a duo with this kind of god-tier loadout.
Yeah, God tier loadout, but it didn't quite work out for Malabuka. And I think Malabuka actually fell victim to the fact that Janice didn't actually have any mobility. He had to just run, and then, of course, Janice was able to get caught in that backside of zone, able to pick up the elimination, but not quite the refresh at the end of it. Of course, Thomas HD, a very valuable solo player to have on your team. If there's anyone you want trying to clutch up as many points as possible as a solo, Thomas HD would probably be at the top of most people's list. But not a bad game from this duo, especially since their loot, though. We would have expected a little bit better.
And again, this is just game 1, right? It's fine. We still have 5 more games. Anything can and will happen. Fortnite has proven that. Really quickly, I do want to highlight one more duo back on page number 1. So as we kind of flip back on over, it's Gripey and it's Flixie here in your 5th place. We've kind of seen this duo perform pretty well in the last couple of weeks, and I kind of want to see them continue to build that momentum. The question is, how do they do that?
They just have to keep being consistent. I mean, this is what we saw from them in last week, of course. They're adapting to this new meta change, these new zones, which I'm really excited about because I think this is a fantastic duo, and I really do think that they can perform very well. Of course, Gripey doing such a great job at clutching up as many points as possible, even staying back in the storm there we just saw with those chug splashes. Just having that extra level of brain, extra level of gameplay to think, you know what, I don't need to rush this. I can just play a little bit more carefully, and he did that really well.
Yeah, and it's impressive as well because, again, when you're smushed to that ultimate low ground, you know that you have teams or individuals playing above you. I like the patience. It just kind of indicates that he's got really strong awareness despite the fact that he wasn't in the greatest spot to begin with.
Man, we've already seen how the circle changes have affected competitive. Party time being disabled has affected competitive. No longer are we looking at heal-offs, though I anticipate we might see something what we might consider a heal-off. Is there anything you guys are hoping to see in the next 5 games? Because this feels like EU of old. The EU I'm used to watching.
Now, I'm just expecting the aggression to maybe pick up, if anything, maybe see if any teams look for a last-minute switch up as well in their drop spot.
Yeah, as I mentioned, no materials for a lot of teams in the end game there, so maybe that will sort of promote a little bit more early aggression to the earlier stage of that end game. And as you mentioned, Steve, we haven't seen that heal off today, and I think now the heal off will be more of an actual intended play rather than a necessity. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I love to see it. Well, hey, guess what? We got 5 more games ready. So are you ready? We're ready. Why don't we just jump back into all the action? This is game 2 of the FNCS.
Our analysts are ready, and so are we. I just hope our competitors, after that first game, are just as ready, because we saw some teams take some prolonged fights in that last game, kind of feeling each other out, which I don't think will work through all 6.
Yeah, it was a bit of a slow start to the game. Right? We kind of sort of had just one team fighting in the lobby for like quite a while, and then it sort of just teetered off after that. I think the big thing, right, coming into this game will be making sure you adapt to some of the mistakes that were made. You look at the likes of Malibuca and Thomas, there was a slight error that cost them in that game, but plenty more things to look at, plenty more opportunities in these games.
Yeah, especially for some of those teams in the lobby. Heed Levin's warning, folks. They're going to go for those Mythic Havoc pumps. They're going to go for Rift Island as well. Somebody has to stop Thomas and Malibuca from heating up game after game. And hopefully Janus, anybody else, can continue what they did with that last one.
Yeah, I think the funny thing is, right, they had the overclocked post rifles and they sort of overcooked themselves in that game. Right? They were a bit too overzealous with some of their, aggression and some of their fights that they were trying to take. But nevertheless, right, there are still more games to be had. And a very favorable zone for Queasy and Veno when they come out and win the game. The good thing is that even in zones that aren't favorable to them, they are still one of the best teams in the lobby. And so you have to be on the lookout regardless of where you are. But we'll see. Game 2 is on the way. The battle bus is allowing the players to leave and get to their POIs. The question is, will there be any differences in some of the Osborne fights, right? A bit of a slow burner in game 1. But will any teams, any players look to switch things up?
Especially with the new zone changes, sometimes that is going to be a must as Deox and Andalex find off. He gets at least a combat and that first elimination. He actually gets both. Andalex, before he even blinked, Deox didn't even enter the house. He finished off 2 different players.
Andalex putting in that work.
Wow.
And that's really unfortunate for Myrox and Slash, right? Because they have to have a very good day today to save their season. They can't afford to just coast by. For this team on our screen here, Mustache and Tayson. Tayson having some technical difficulties. We didn't actually see them in that first game. But it's imperative that they do play these games out, get their series points, because they will be well on their way to the grand finals if so. And of course, they're the reigning champions in EU, so we obviously want to see them doing well here again this season. Blatcher and Mixon though, another Osborne fight for them, and one that is going to look a lot quicker. Of course, this fight dragged on in game 1, Jacob, but Blatcher and Mixon getting it done very, very quickly.
Yeah, they were able to get the high ground, get all the loot, and then the ODM attack to kind of stop all the hiding. Perfect recipe for success over on that side of things, but just on the outskirts of Shattered Slabs. Yapko and Vortex, Zarky and Ricky here yet again. These two kind of disengaged into that first fight. Nobody really had a clear winner off the POI, but Ricky's going to get dropped first, but it's a trade. Vortex gets taken out as well. Yapko trying to go above and over, but that's to go for the quick cleanup on the Arky. He needs those Siphon mats. He needs anything he can work with at this point in time.
This is tough for Ark, but he does have the ODM gear if he wants to start going crazy with it. Or if he wants to leave, which probably is the more sensible choice. I'm a man of chaos myself, so would love to see him make that play. Nevertheless, though, if he's able to get Ricky back into the game, there is hope for this duo.
Like in the back of his mind, at the very minimum, he's putting his pride aside, because you got to imagine he's probably thinking in his head, I could have taken him. I could beat him 1v1, but he's like, I want to play that team game. I got the reboot card. Let me disengage and try to go for a reboot. Be the name of the game throughout the day. Actually, players gonna decide how important is getting your teammate back into the game versus continue on his solo, not putting that huge target on yourself like the reboot van actually does.
Fury and Lusher landing at the Citadel. A bit of a switch up in their spots for this week, but the good thing for them, right, is that they actually could just watch some of their friends and Shamoki and Swizzy, just watch their VODs, see exactly how they play. I would Wouldn't be surprised if they've messaged them asking for a bit of help, right? How do we play the spot? And that's also like a good thing. That's something I always advise to players who are, you know, getting into comp. Like, find a team who you like and just try to copy their style completely, right? Copy the places they go for surge, figure out where exactly they are, trying to find control on the map, and, you know, iterate from there. Figure out what works for you. Pachawa and Kefi, they need to make this fight work for them if they have any hope. Quick little chop here just to force Giras down.
Wait a minute.
And once he goes falling down, they will be there ready with their SMGs to take him out.
If it wasn't the actual SMG, man, he got tagged up. The ODM, he would have taken fall damage regardless. It's a bad position to be in for Gearys, but for Pachawa and Kepi, you have to quickly take advantage of those situations. We've seen it throughout the course of the past 2 weeks in order to get up into this point, and that is going to remain true here. As Queasy, Veno, and over towards Kenjutsu Crossing, but they're one of the teams you know as well as I do. They don't necessarily play as a duo because they're uncontested.
Well, yeah, they just have so much map control, right? You know, there's nobody really in this area. Queasy's allowed to just sort of farm the metal from the gas station, which just gives them so many good resources. Of course, they obviously play for their cash as well. The one thing I will say, right, is everybody, you know, was laughing about, you know, me playing with, you know, Spawn and winning the fights there. And that was, of course, a bunch of fun. But one of the things I enjoyed the most is playing actually the mid game with Vino and seeing how much detail and how much intention goes into every single move and every single decision that gets made. It's a reason why these guys are the best team in the region right now.
So he plays like every move is calculated from the start. Like Sky and Stroll, they're trying to just continue to force their opponents lower and lower to the ground as they try to hold as much height as possible and quickly trying to close onto that gap. And this is one of those positions for Skrull and Sky. Do you stay here? Do you fight for as long as possible? Because they're at the edge of zone. In theory, they could build a tower in the sky and try to gatekeep everybody to the northwest, but they want this team right in front of their very eyes.
Very much know where to find them. Right here, Skrull's just waiting for that right shot. Looking for a bit of control as well. Will he be able to pick up this floor? No. Churro that picks it up.
Hiding, crouching is going to be important in a fight like this because it minimizes your audio cue, minimizes where your opponents can kind of guess where you're going to try to attack from. As Wheat, Roll just continuously staying down lower and lower to the low ground, and this is what you could count on for some of these teams, is even though high ground is more advantageous, playing into a spot that you're comfortable is even more important. They're comfortable fighting from the low ground, they're comfortable in their box, and they're waiting for one of those teams to try to drop down into the wrong position.
Malibu and Thomas once again picking up the boat at Mega City, and all I can think about is, you know, this is obviously a very situational thing, but I doubt that they're going to be able to do that every game of a grand final, right? Go into Mega City, win the vote, and actually get it. That's probably going to be something that's tough, but I guess they are focused on, you know, just winning this week and playing out this week to the best of their abilities. Tayson and Mustache over here at Slappy. It's good to see Tayson with some ODM gear. One of the biggest problems that they have out of this spot, Slappy Shawls went from being one of the best POIs in competitive Fortnite, but with the lack of movement available at this spot, it makes it very, very difficult. If they don't find spawns like that one and get very fortunate, and there isn't movement available, right? I watched one of the games from round one. It was like first move in zone. Every single player in the lobby had a movement item, whether it be a katana or ODM gear, except for Tayson. It's like he was the only player of like 40 players still alive that didn't have movement. So it'll be very tough out of Slappy.
You can see what their plan is here towards Mega City. Taking a page out of the Reese Hub qualify with no weapons playbook. Didn't work out for him, but for Flick saying Raipe, hey, maybe they're going to find a bunch of success here. We quickly put all their heals towards the high ground, and that kind of shows exactly what their role is. Raipe's just going for surge tags. He's trying to put shots on everybody else in the lobby, while Flixay is just trying to scavenge as much loot as possible. Extra heals, extra resources, any upgrades to their loaded as they can find.
It's interesting. We have another game where the zone is pulling towards the very east, towards the next area. The zone gods favoring Queasy Vino, Mr. Savage Video again today. Of course, Mr. Savage Video didn't quite have the best starts to the day. So hopefully they can amend that here in game number 2.
Really kind of, when you pull zone like this, very, very early on, it kind of, I wouldn't say it messes with your head, but it leaves you with so many different decisions to where if the zone pulls, you know exactly what you do. You kind of box up, you get your surge tags, you keep rotating, you go to the slow side. If you're in zone, it's kind of that mind game of where do I position? Where do I find surge? This might not be the best spot for the zone, but it's the best spot to get surge. And Mr. Savage and Video, they know exactly how to play in a lot of these scenarios. They're even brave enough to kind of separate just like Queasy and Veno and take 2 different height positions around the map to try to get surge. Wow, no, as soon as we tune in, Pixie goes down, and Della knows. I like how quick that kind of turned on in his head. I gotta be able to disengage. I gotta run as far away as possible, especially with the changes to the zone and heal off not becoming that prominent win condition. It allows him to go deeper and deeper and actually take the ticks.
Thank you. It's been such a force. Some of the weeks we've seen them in, they were very impressive last time round, and they've already started today well and taken out Della and Pixie. Is a very, very good thing for them, especially considering that these guys like to play for height when possible. Della and Pixie are another team that obviously like to play very aggressively for high ground as well when it comes to the end game. You can see the coordination, Zangi using that ODM gear, Zara waiting for the perfect timing for the shot. These guys have been on a roll, and definitely a team to watch out for as we move forward. Seem to have everything on lock.
I would be a little worried for that duo across. If I didn't already know that was Gripe and Flixie, they have the extra heals towards the top, and that is exactly why. And it's great to see it from a different POV, them land the shots and not take advantage of the amount of damage they put out, because they know so many other teams are probably doing the same strategy as Refsguard and Hellfire.
That's how you play Surge, right, in Mega City, right? All the teams look to base up, they have their spare heals, and you just go for trades, essentially, right? You're like, hey, I'll peek. You're going to take shots at me? Oh, I'll take shots at you back, right? It's a sort of a game in that sense, a game within the game that they all play.
Pablo Ingu and Bevies, this is one of those teams that they need to have a great performance on the day if they want that direct ticket into the grand finals. And that's something that's huge, because we've seen some big names in FNCSs of the past have to go through Surge Week and not make it out like we would expect them to.
Yeah, and this is a team that has been competing for a while in terms of as individual players. Bevies and Pablo Ingu have been in the scene, been competing for a good amount of time now, a couple of years. Last season, they really sort of burst onto the scene with top performances. Unfortunately, their names were like Ludwig and Albi, so nobody really knew it was them. But in any case, they showed us that they can be one of the top teams. This season hasn't quite gone their way, and so they'll need a top performance to sort of make us all forget about that. Show up here.
Same thing with Trulex and Cheeto there that we saw moments ago. And that's the thing, that even when a lot of these top teams that are current positioned at the top of the series point leaderboard, it's those solo clutches that one player of the duo has been able to achieve to kind of keep them above and beyond the rest of the players here in the lobby.
And look here, Arizumi and Syned, one of the only teams in the lobby that's actually played all 3 qualifiers. They've been here for 1, for 2, for 3. Let's see if they can top their best performance. Oh, dearie me, what's happened, Thomas HD? You have to use that slurp right now. But again, look where they are. They're trying to get the Rift Island, and they want the loot from it. This game, though, they're going to be a bit more contested, and so they're going to have to work for it if they really want it. Thomas has to be careful, because it's not just the players on the island that are going to be an issue. It's all the ones in this surrounding area as well. And again, getting cracked from a distance. Thomas, you have to be careful of that team across.
Because they're on the top of Rift Island, so many teams that may not necessarily be below are going to try to take the shots on them.
The problem is he only has the SMG, right? It's can't punish that team from afar. Can only shoot them with his SMG, and it's not going to do much from that range.
That's allowed the opponents to get into a fighting position at the top of Rift Island. This is not the best position for Malabuka and Thomas to be in, but if anybody's going to welcome a fight like that, it is going to be them, just like Mr. Savage and Vidil. They got Artis separated from his teammate, probably sent back to the lobby before. So he's back up against the wall. Any shots that he puts here is going to be huge, especially if he's going to try to disengage moments after. As Vidil, huge tag as Artis continuously trying to fight back. As a solo, we talked about some impact points. This could be the start of his journey.
Yeah, and the problem here with this fight isn't actually to do with any of these teams other than Queasy and Vino. If you're Queasy and Vino and you see this fight happening in the beat, you are thinking, Vidil Savage, please no. Because Artist and Fire, bro, they're the duo that was contesting Queasy and Vino, giving them problems off spawn. If they've moved away, they're not contesting them at Kenjutsu anymore. So if they struggle, they're gonna probably move back there. And Queasy and Vino don't want that, so they'll be hoping those guys do as good as possible. But to update us on some of the teams who are also trying their best to do as good as possible, we have Vivid here to talk about Janice and Reed.
Of course, one of those teams that needs a good finish here today to make those grand finals. Of course, the strategies are coming out. Reason actually dropping all of his materials so that Janus can actually hold that high ground and all of that positioning over Slappy. But when he's out here refarming, he notices that these key boxes actually have some very key loot. So Janus actually, concedes that position, goes out to buy the katana and the chug splashes, so that way they will have those for the later game. And if you pay attention to the zones, they're actually pulling towards Slappy. So this positioning could be really good for this duo.
Thank you once again, Vivid. And you even hit a nail on the head that Levin was talking about before. Slappy Shores, it used to be one of the best POIs. You get heals, you get material, you get everything you need except for mobility. Now what happens when a hollow chest is just outside of your location with a kinetic blade? That's something you can grab, and they already got their overclock pulse rifle. They got their mythic havoc. Now they just came back to finish the job they started moments ago.
And they finish it though. Oh my, he's added some limbs to his count. We'll see just exactly how they're able to do that in the fight for it. I said the fight for it. They already have it at this stage, and they're just punishing teams with it. A rare miss shot from Thomas HD there, but making up for it as Julien falls to his demise. Oh boy. That's what Thomas HD makes people do. Just makes them say, look, I don't want any part of this thing anymore. I want to jump off that.
That's literally what he made him do. He thought he had better chances just jumping off than he did fighting back. And that's something you really got to take note of game after game, because it's already game number 2, and Levin is 2 out of 2 talking about them contesting on over towards Rift Island. And Janice and Reason, they got themselves a nice little spot outside of Slappy Shores. They're just kind of waiting to kind of feel around where the rest of the teams are going to position before they go ahead and make their next rotation forward.
Yeah. And of course, I bigged them up last game. They didn't quite have the performance that justified the lead up. A big problem with that was when they were using their kinetic blades later on in the game, right? They tried to blade from the congested side of the zone. Janice blocked their head. It messed up the timing. They end up losing sort of as a result of that. So they need to be more careful about the timings and where they're blading from.
That zone just kind of gave me some feelings of a horror movie that's about to begin for some of these teams. A massive pull towards the north side of the map, and it's different than we've seen before, because in the last game, you saw most of the team kind of get blessed. The zone pulled in their direction. Now the majority of the lobby has a huge amount of distance to cover from point A to point B. And then you have to go bypass a team with some of the best aim in the island right now. That's Thomas and Malabuka. Oh no. Storm Surge, foreseeing what happens if you're not able to find those tags early on. You become a victim. As Scroll is just running out of time, trying to pop the med kit. He should be able to get it off and kind of get himself 100 HP, but I don't know if he got to reset it there for the second. I think that's going to be it for Scroll. His chances have run out. Not the best look, but at the same time, you got to do what you got to do.
That is a very difficult watch, unfortunately. It will be the end of their game, but they do have many more opportunities to play out this lobby. Tasting the mustache in their first game here. First game, and they pulled the zone, of course. Tayson's luck. My oh my. And they're well above on Surge as well.
It looks like
here.
3-4 teams, an exploding gas station. It looks like an action movie right before our very eyes. And who would have thought the hero kind of walk away as the dust settles? Malabuka and Thomas again, they're ramping up that aggression because they have the loadout to do so. They're trying to take advantage of so many teams. He spots him at the tail end. It was his Achilles heel that Malabuka spotted around that corner to take him down. And now with one player left, they're using it as a green light. Those pulse rifles just shredding the builds, trying to get in through the box, but they realize now's not the time to get greedy. That happened in game number 1, and look what happened.
Yeah, they have no reason at all to stay here and fight. 555, max materials, pulse rifles, mythic shotgun, kinetic blade, shield.